ancients discovered was not a secret, but an experience beyond language.
What if a single secret ritual promised to unlock the mysteries of life, death, and immortality, one so powerful its secrets were guarded for over 2,000 years? Today, we'll step onto the sacred way, retracing the footsteps of ancient initiates who risked everything to glimpse the eternal truth hidden in the Eleusinian Mysteries. But what made this ritual so transformative, and why did the world's greatest minds, like Socrates, yearn to participate? Stay with us to uncover the power of a ritual that dared to explain death itself. Imagine a world where religion wasn't just about temples or sacrifices, but about weaving the divine into the fabric of everyday life. In ancient Greece, religion wasn't confined to a private personal practice or a periodic obligation. It was omnipresent. From the grand festivals honoring Zeus to the quiet offerings made to household spirits, religion touched everything. Yet, crucially, it wasn't just about paying tribute to the gods. It was about trying to understand humanity's place in a universe governed by forces much greater than ourselves. And among the constellation of Greek customs and rituals, the Eleusinian Mysteries stood apart. They didn't merely aim to honor the gods, they sought to offer participants something far more elusive, a direct experience of the divine, one that might come closer to revealing life's ultimate truths. Greek religion wasn't monolithic, but it was largely public. Festivals, sacrifices, and rites were held out in the open, often blending celebration with worship. But the Eleusinian Mysteries? They shunned the open air of Greek temples and agora. They were secret, exclusive, shrouded in a silence so strict that revealing their details could cost you your life. In a society that valued open discourse and celebrated intellectual debate, this secrecy made them utterly unique. They stood outside the norm, inviting speculation, curiosity, and reverence in equal measure. If most religious festivals catered to the populace at large, spreading their rituals like a banquet, the Mysteries offered an intimate seating at a hidden table, reserved only for those willing to commit to their path. What drove this fierce veil of confidentiality wasn't just tradition. It was the belief that words alone could never capture the depth of the experience. Participation required a commitment. You had to be free-born, speak Greek, and arrive with no blood guilt, meaning you couldn't harbor an unatoned murder. These were significant barriers, yet they also leveled the field. Remarkably, within the Mysteries, lineage and wealth ceased to matter. An aristocrat could find themselves standing beside a poor farmer, brothers in their shared pursuit of enlightenment. This egalitarian aspect was remarkable in a society where social hierarchies were otherwise rigid. While the everyday world retained its stark divisions between rich and poor, the Mysteries blurred those lines, creating an environment where what you sought mattered more than what you owned. But why the risk, the secrecy, and the allure? The promise was both simple and profound, an encounter with something deeply transformative. Participants were not just performing sacred obligations to appease the gods or ensure agricultural bounty. They were embarking on a journey inward, one designed to reshape their understanding of life and death. This wasn't worship in the conventional sense. It was a quest, a philosophical pursuit wrapped in ritual. You didn't just step into the Mysteries, you let them step into you. For the Greeks, whose society was built on the exchange of words, ideas, and open inquiry, this secrecy created tension. What could possibly be so sacred that it couldn't be shared? Philosophers speculated, outsiders gossiped, yet those few who took part became fiercely protective of what they experienced, their silence speaking volumes. Some scholars suggest that the Mysteries offered not just religious insights, but also a deeply personal transformation. Perhaps this was why even luminaries like Plato and later Roman emperors were drawn to Eleusis, not just for divine blessings, but for a kind of transformative wisdom that transcended language. It's also worth considering how the secrecy itself intensified the ritual's psychological impact. Walking into the unknown, knowing this was something you couldn't prepare for in full, created a profound mental shift. Everyday logic fell away, replaced by anticipation and trust in the process. The secrecy wasn't about exclusion for its own sake. It was about protecting an experience that transcended the ordinary frame of understanding, one that needed to be felt rather than narrated. At the heart of the mysteries was transformation. The rites promised initiates a glimpse of immortality. Within a society where death was an omnipresent reality, this was no small offering. While Greek mythology often portrayed an afterlife that was bleak at best, think of the shadowy existence of Hades. Hopeful, the mysteries hinted at something different, a renewal, a rebirth. What precisely they saw or learned inside the sanctuary at Eleusis remains unknown, but nearly all accounts point to a profound emotional catharsis. Initiates emerged changed, with a more profound connection to life, the gods, and their own mortality. But what exactly created this change? Was it the collective power of shared ritual? The palpable bond that forms when hundreds of people pursue the same transcendent goal? Was it the symbolic narrative they encountered, one rooted in the story of Demeter and Persephone? Or was it something deeper that words didn't, and perhaps still don't, quite capture? One thing is clear. For those who participated, the mysteries were much more than a religious act. They offered the rarest of human experiences, a brush with the ineffable. This convergence of secretive transformation and public intrigue ensured the mystery's survival for centuries. People weren't just seeking answers to theological questions, they were looking for something immediate, something felt. And as the promise of spiritual renewal spread, more and more were drawn to Eleusis, walking the sacred way with minds clouded by curiosity, anticipation, and perhaps a touch of fear for what awaited them. Which leaves us with the question, what exactly did they experience within the sanctuary that left participants convinced they'd glimpsed something eternal? Let's step further into the process and try to understand the path initiates walk toward this ultimate transformation. The sacred way wasn't just a road, it was a transformation set in motion. Stretching 14 miles from the bustling city of Athens to the serene sanctuary of Eleusis, this ancient path carried immense significance for those who walked it. It wasn't just the destination that mattered, though, it was the journey itself. Each step, marking out the distance between the familiar and the unknown, became a passage from ordinary life into something extraordinary. The journey began on the 5th day of the Greater Mysteries, a time known as the Pompeii or procession. Hundreds of initiates gathered in Athens, their shared purpose transforming the walk into much more than an individual effort. They carried branches known as bakchoi, waving them in unison as they sang and chanted hymns. The road wasn't silent, but filled with the hum of voices rising together, creating a communal rhythm that propelled them forward. This wasn't simply a stroll through the Greek countryside, it was an act of collective dedication, each participant connected by the same goal: to stand before the divine at Eleusis. Along the way, there were pauses for important acts of worship. Temples and altars dedicated to minor gods and spirits cropped up along the path, drawing everyone into the repeated flow of stopping, offering, and moving forward again. These moments punctuated the rhythm of the procession, grounding it with acts of reverence that kept their spiritual focus sharp. Initiates cleansed themselves, symbolically washing away the physical and mental grime they carried from their lives outside the ritual. Sacrifices were made, acts of giving meant to align human effort with divine favor. The road itself became sacred ground, step by step, until it no longer felt like an ordinary path at all. It's no coincidence that this journey was carefully structured as a physical challenge as well. 14 miles might not sound like much to some, but in an era without modern comforts, it was an arduous trek mentally, and physically taxing. By the end, the initiates felt the weight of their effort, their focus sharpened by the demands of the walk. To the uninitiated world, it might just seem like a long communal hike, but the distance carried deeper meaning. Each step, each mile, added to the growing sense of leaving behind one life and entering another. It mirrored the trials of life itself, periods of strain, moments of reflection, and eventual arrival at something greater. The preparation for the mysteries didn't just come from rituals or the road's physical demands. The sacred way was heavily symbolic, calling on participants to think of their own lives as a journey. Every person moved forward at their own pace, yet the sense of unity was undeniable. They were traveling together, yet each was also walking a private path. Alongside the anticipation of what awaited, there was room for contemplation about life, mortality, the unknown. You can imagine how the road set a mood of expectancy, raising questions rather than offering easy answers. What would Eleusis reveal? Could it live up to this long symbolic journey? As the procession neared the sanctuary, the anticipation heightened. By the time Eleusis came into view, the initiates were already transformed in subtle ways. Their voices would have grown quieter as the rituals along the path gave their steps a sense of solemnity. The sanctuary's looming walls created an almost otherworldly atmosphere. Torches burned in the gathering twilight, their light flickering against the darkening landscape, casting the first hints of mystery and wonder to come. For those walking, it must have felt as though they'd reached the threshold of another world, a space where normal rules no longer applied. This wasn't just an exterior transformation. The road demanded introspection, softening the mind for what lay ahead. In Greek thought, the contrast between the body's physical toil and the mind's awakening played a central role in preparation for the mysteries. The repetitive nature of walking, the shared prayers and hymns, even the exhaustion, all of it worked to create a liminal state. The pain of the journey wasn't just a strain to deplore, it was part of the cleansing process. Purification didn't just happen in the streams and altars they stopped at. It was happening in their hearts and thoughts too. By the time every foot fell upon the bridge into Eleusis, the air was thick with both relief and tension. Yet, they had only reached the beginning of what truly made this journey transformational. The sacred way, with its symbolic trials and constant reminders of purpose, primed them for the mysteries. To say it was simply travel misses the point. It was a psychological, emotional, and spiritual crossing. Through it, the everyday could be left behind, allowing the mind to inch closer to the divine. So, why did these 14 miles become such an integral part of the ritual? Because they represented life's journey itself. The struggles, hopes, and determination to press onward, even in uncertainty. Whatever lay beyond the threshold of the sanctuary, the walk ensured that initiates arrived ready to receive it. They had earned their place, not by wealth or status, but through their shared perseverance. And as they stepped into Eleusis, the world behind them seemed to fade. Everything they'd prepared for, everything they'd sacrificed for, awaited inside the Telesterion. What could the mysteries reveal that turned this symbolic walk into a life-altering transformation? The Telesterion was more than a hall. It was the beating heart of the Eleusinian Mysteries, a space that brought centuries of initiates face to face with something profound. This structured but open building had been rebuilt time and again, with its most enduring design crafted in the 5th century BCE under Pericles' guidance. Its vast interior, filled with rows of seats and a forest of columns, was unique, a deliberate design choice to draw thousands into a shared ritual while still preserving an aura of mystery. Here, in this quiet yet imposing space, initiates were stripped of the world outside. Everything they had done to prepare, every mile of the sacred way, led to this moment. At the center of it all stood the enacted, A small, highly restricted chamber. Only the hierophants, the high priests of Eleusis, were allowed to enter this sacred room. Known to house the mysterious hera or sacred objects, the enacteron was more than a physical structure. It symbolized the threshold between the mortal and divine realms, a hidden core whose secrecy mirrored the mysteries themselves. The lay initiates would never step inside this chamber, nor would they ever know what it held. This lack of access didn't alienate them, it deepened their reverence. In a space filled with shadows and flickering torchlight, the enacteron's veiled presence radiated a constant reminder that some truths lay just beyond reach. The initiation rites inside the Telesterion were carried out during the night, enhancing the sense of mystery and heightening the senses of the participants. Darkness wasn't simply the backdrop but an active part of the ritual. Torches lit the space, their glow flickering across the seated crowd, casting fleeting patterns of light and shadow. This interplay between darkness and illumination wasn't just dramatic, it mirrored the themes of the Demeter and Persephone myth that form the backbone of the mysteries. Just as the goddess of spring had been lost to the underworld, swallowed by the dark, only to emerge again, the initiates were meant to experience their own journey into symbolic death and rebirth. While secrecy shrouds the precise nature of what occurred, fragments have survived through ancient writers. The core of the mysteries revolved around three elements. There were the legomena, or things said, the dromena, things enacted, and the deiknimena, things shown. These three layers of the ritual weren't simply steps to be completed, they overlapped, creating a full sensory and emotional experience designed to change the initiate. In the legomena, sacred words were spoken by the priests, words that likely carried power not in their meaning alone but in their delivery, the ancient Greek equivalent of a resonating chant or mantra. The dromena, the actions performed before the crowd, reenacted the myth of Demeter's relentless search for her daughter Persephone, showcasing themes of grief, hope, and renewal in ways that drew initiates physically and emotionally into the story. And finally, the deiknimena brought it all to a climax with the revealing of sacred objects. Accounts are unclear about what these objects were, possibly fragments tied to the myth or natural elements like grain or light. Whatever they saw, the act of revelation was transformative, connecting initiates to something far larger than themselves. The myth of Demeter and Persephone itself carried an emotional weight that could have broken through the intellectual distance of those watching. Demeter's anguish at losing her daughter gave voice to one of humanity's deepest fears: loss. Her eventual reunion with Persephone symbolized something equally vital: the promise of renewal. This drama wasn't just entertainment, it was a mirror. Those sitting in darkness with torches and shadows weren't just observers, they were meant to feel as though they too had walked into the underworld with Persephone. They too would witness her ascent. One theory about why this experience felt so profound lies in the ritual drink known as the kaikion. Consumed during the rites, this drink, made from barley and water, is believed to have been psychoactive. Some scholars suggest it may have included ergot, a fungus with hallucinogenic properties. If true, the kaikion would have made the initiates more receptive to the sensory and symbolic elements of the ritual. Imagine this: a hall full of people, united in purpose, sitting in moving shadows, listening to sacred words, and watching a story unfold before them, their perceptions heightened, their emotions raw. The combination of these elements would have dissolved ordinary boundaries between the self and the divine. Everything inside the Telesterion worked together to create the sensation of a deeply personal yet unifying transformation. The darkness, the chanting, the symbolic death, and the final revelation were designed to draw initiates into a state of catharsis. At its peak, The ritual offered them a chance to confront the most frightening reality, death itself, and to experience rebirth on the other side. By physically and emotionally stepping into the myth, the initiates weren't just told something profound about life and mortality, they had lived it. By the end of the rites, initiates emerged changed. Many spoke afterward of having glimpsed immortality or having seen the divine, even though no one broke the vow of secrecy. The gravity with which participants described their experience hints at its lasting impact. These rites didn't just offer a theological answer to the afterlife. They gave initiates the feeling of transcendence, a profound personal connection to the divine mysteries of life, death, and the cosmos. What is striking, even today, is how this ancient ritual sought not to impose belief, but to create experience. For the ancient Greeks, who valued reason and debate, the mysteries offered something reason alone couldn't touch, a visceral understanding of life's greater patterns. But how did this ancient promise of transformation ripple outward, influencing spiritual traditions that came after? Could its echoes persist in our understanding of rebirth and immortality today? The human search for meaning is as old as civilization itself. Questions about life, death, and what might lie beyond have fueled countless traditions, philosophies, and rituals. Yet the Eleusinian Mysteries, in their secrecy and depth, stand out. At their core was the promise of transformation, of connecting the finite human experience to something infinite. What's so striking is that while these rites ended centuries ago, the themes they explored continue to underpin the way we think about existence today. Their legacy threads through both ancient and modern beliefs, a quiet yet persistent reminder of our timeless desire to understand what it means to live, die, and be reborn. One of the mysteries' most lasting impacts can be traced through their influence on later spiritual and philosophical traditions. Early Christianity, for example, carried echoes of Eleusis in its concepts of resurrection and personal renewal. Like the mysteries, Christianity offered hope in the face of mortality, presenting a vision of life after death that was transformative rather than static. The mysteries' promise of a joyous afterlife stood in stark contrast to the bleak underworld of traditional Greek belief, and this reassessment of death as a threshold rather than an ending may have indirectly shaped Christian ideas of salvation. The two traditions shared another key element, the act of initiation as a life-changing moment. Just as being baptized marked a spiritual rebirth in Christianity, initiation into the Eleusinian Mysteries was seen as a metaphorical passing from ignorance to enlightenment. Beyond religion, the Eleusinian Mysteries influenced philosophical circles as well. Plato himself alluded to their themes in his works, emphasizing the importance of seeking truth beyond sensory appearances. Initiates walked away from Eleusis with a sense that they had experienced something beyond reason, a direct encounter with something sacred. This experiential understanding resonated with figures like Socrates and later Neoplatonic thinkers who held that ultimate knowledge could only be grasped through profound personal transformation. The mysteries demonstrated that wisdom wasn't simply a matter of acquiring information, but of fundamentally changing how one perceives the world. Interestingly, the psychological and symbolic aspects of Eleusis still find parallels in modern practices. Consider the rising interest in meditation retreats, where solitude and reflection push participants toward personal insight. Or psychedelic therapy, which, in carefully controlled settings, helps people confront deep fears or traumas, often leading to a renewed sense of purpose. These practices echo elements of the mysteries, the structured environments, the focus on preparation, and the idea that significant change comes from experiencing, not just learning. Even the ritual drink consumed at Eleusis, the kykeon, may have had psychoactive properties, amplifying participants' immersion in the rites and their psychological impact. Another key connection lies in the role of symbolic storytelling in shaping experience. Modern therapy and spiritual growth often integrate guided visualization or storytelling to help participants reframe their understanding of life's challenges. At Eleusis, the myth of Demeter and Persephone served a similar purpose. By emotionally connecting initiates to the goddess's grief and eventual reunion with her daughter, the myth provided a lens through which they could confront mortality. The myth's universality, loss, survival, and the hope of renewal continues to resonate in contemporary rituals and traditions meant to help people process transitions or upheavals. In essence, storytelling becomes the bridge between symbol and personal transformation. What's also striking is the communal aspect of the mysteries and their modern reflections. At Eleusis, men and women from all walks of life walked the sacred way together, participated in the same rites, and left with the shared understanding of an experience that transcended status and individuality. In today's world, communal events like group meditation or collective mourning ceremonies still harness this power. There's something deeply human about seeking connection through structured, shared actions. It binds people, not just to one another, but to larger questions about existence. Psychologically, the impact of the shared experience cannot be overlooked. Rituals like the mysteries pulled initiates out of their everyday lives and plunged them into another space entirely. The transition from the mundane to the profound was intentional, creating an atmosphere where personal transformation felt not just possible, but inevitable. Modern practices often aim for the same change in perspective, breaking the hold of routine to give participants a sense of clarity, renewal, or deeper connection. Whether it's walking in silence at a retreat or stepping into a virtual reality meditation space, the goal remains the same: to create an environment where profound, transformative insight can occur. But why does this pattern of symbolic death and rebirth remain so compelling? Perhaps it reflects a deeper psychological need, one that transcends time and culture. People seek rituals that make sense of existence because rituals provide structure, scaffolding around life's biggest questions. Mystery rites, like those at Eleusis, once answered these questions for scores of initiates, and today rituals continue to fill that role, whether spiritual, therapeutic, or even secular. The Eleusinian Mysteries ultimately remind us of the power of ritual, not just in its ability to connect us to a higher meaning, but in how it helps us connect to one another. To die, metaphorically, and to be reborn is not just about individual transformation, it's about rejoining the world with new eyes. What the ancient initiates experienced carries a lesson we still pursue in our own ways: the need to step outside the ordinary to see life in its fullness. But the question remains: what does their ancient wisdom reveal about our modern search for transcendence? Could their rituals hold clues about the consciousness we still strive to understand? In the year 396 CE, the sacred sanctuary at Eleusis was destroyed, and with it, the Eleusinian Mysteries came to an end after 2,000 years of continuous practice. King Alaric and his Visigoth army, sweeping through Greece, delivered the final blow by physically dismantling the heart of this revered tradition. But this act of destruction was more than just a casualty of war. It was part of a larger transformation unfolding in the ancient world. As Christianity rose to dominance across the Roman Empire, the old pagan rites, once the lifeblood of Greek spirituality and civic life, were increasingly viewed as obstacles to the new religious order. By this time, the Eleusinian Mysteries were already under threat, not just from external invaders, but from a fundamental shift in belief systems that reshaped the spiritual landscape of the ancient Mediterranean. In 392 CE, just a few years before Alaric's invasion, Emperor Theodosius I issued a decree banning all pagan rituals throughout the empire. This was no vague law. It was a pointed effort to consolidate Christianity as the singular faith of Rome. Temples were shut down, and sacred practices that had defined Greek and Roman religious traditions for centuries were outlawed. Eleusis, of course, was not exempt. The Hierophants, who had long presided over the mysteries and passed down their sacred knowledge, found themselves facing a stark choice: convert to Christianity and abandon the old ways, or risk persecution. As the number of priests dwindled, so too did the knowledge of the secret rituals that once drew even emperors and philosophers to this sanctuary. The damage caused by the rise of Christianity wasn't just structural or logistical. It marked a philosophical shift. Christianity's focus on dogma and universal truth clashed sharply with the experiential and symbolic nature of the Eleusinian Mysteries. The mysteries didn't prescribe belief. They didn't offer a guide to morality or salvation in the same way Christian teachings did. Instead, they provided a deeply personal, transformative experience, one that participants were forbidden to describe, but felt compelled to protect. This emphasis on inward discovery made them fundamentally incompatible with a faith that prioritized doctrine and the centralization of religious practice. What's fascinating, though, is how the mysteries left a subtle imprint on the very religion that helped extinguish them. Early Christianity adopted some of the same themes that had drawn people to Eleusis for generations: death and rebirth, the promise of a better life beyond the grave, and the idea of spiritual transformation. Even the Christian concept of resurrection echoes the symbolic rebirth initiates underwent in rites commemorating Demeter and Persephone's journey between the underworld and the living world. It's as though the mysteries, despite their secrecy, whispered their truths into the evolving fabric of Western spirituality. But the real mystery is this: why do they continue to resonate, even though no one alive today knows the exact details of what happened within the Telesterion? Perhaps because the questions they sought to answer, how to transcend fear of death, how to find connection with something greater, are universal. Modern spiritual practices, from meditation to plant medicine rituals, attempt to offer what Eleusis once promised: a tangible encounter with transformation. They too emphasize experience over dogma, mirroring the mystery's enduring appeal to those disillusioned by rigid systems of belief. It's also worth reflecting on the emphasis Eleusis placed on ritual as a shared human experience. Initiates walked through darkness together, trusting in the process and in one another. Even today, humans turn to collective practices to heal, transform, and find purpose. Whether it's joining a retreat, attending a ceremony, or engaging in symbolic traditions, the communal thread remains unbroken. Eleusis may have faded, but the blueprint it created continues to shape how humans approach the profound questions of life and death. So what lessons survive? First, that transformation is most powerful when it's experienced directly, rather than being taught in words or texts. Second, that the symbolic confrontation with mortality can lead to a richer, more meaningful connection to life itself. And finally, that rituals, those deeply human acts of intention and repetition, carry the ability to connect us, not just to one another, but to something vast and unexplainable. These threads of the mysteries haven't vanished, They've simply woven themselves into new forms, carrying forward the same ancient longing to understand what it means to be human. And yet, you have to wonder, what other ancient wisdom might still linger, not in texts or ruins, but in the traditions we create today? If Eleusis could illuminate the most profound corners of human consciousness for thousands of years, what else might still lie waiting beneath the surface, ready to be rediscovered when we need it most? Blessed is he who has beheld the mysteries, wrote Pindar. He knows the aim, he knows the origin of life. The Eleusinian Mysteries weren't simply rituals, they were a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest questions about existence. By confronting symbolic death, initiates found a pathway to understanding life more fully. It's a reminder that rituals, ancient or modern, guide us toward transformation. So, what practices today offer that same journey inward? Meditation, storytelling, even shared collective experiences hold clues. The ancient initiates walked the sacred way, seeking life's secret. Now the question is, what path will you choose for your own?